The dining room at the Thornton estate was filled with polished silver, fine china, and strained smiles. It was one of those dinners where no one said what they really wanted to say. The chandelier above sparkled like it was watching, waiting for something to happen. Marcus Thornton sat at the head of the long, glossy table. His suit was sharp, his posture perfect, but his eyes kept glancing at the empty seat beside him, Nora's seat. His fiancée was late. Or maybe she wasn't coming at all. Aunt Vivian, seated directly across from Marcus, tapped her spoon against her glass. "Is Nora not joining us tonight?" she asked, her voice sweet but sharp underneath. Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but before he could say anything, the dining room door opened. Everyone turned. A young woman walked in quietly, holding a silver tray with a steaming dish. She wore a plain black dress, white apron, and her dark hair was tied back in a simple bun. She didn't look like she belonged in the room, but she walked with quiet confidence. "This is Emily," Marcus said suddenly, standing up. "She'll be helping out this evening." The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Emily set the tray down in front of Aunt Vivian without a word. Her face was calm. She didn't smile, but she didn't look nervous either. There was something in her eyes, steady, clear, that made it hard to look away. Aunt Vivian narrowed her eyes. "A maid? At a formal family dinner?" Marcus sat down again, avoiding everyone's gaze. "Just for tonight." Emily moved around the table gracefully, serving each person with quiet efficiency. But every movement felt intentional, controlled. Not like someone used to taking orders, but someone choosing to play a role. One of the younger cousins whispered something and laughed. Chelsea, Marcus's cousin, raised an eyebrow and leaned over to her mother, whispering behind a wine glass. Still, Emily remained calm. She didn't flinch. She didn't react. Aunt Vivian stared hard at her as Emily placed a dish in front of her. Her lips curled into a cold smile. "Who hired her?" she asked in a sharp whisper. Emily met her eyes without blinking. She didn't say a word, but the look she gave was fearless, like she had a secret, like she wasn't the maid at all. And suddenly, the room felt even colder. Emily Carter was 28 years old. She had grown up in a small apartment with her mother, just the two of them. Her mother worked 2 jobs to keep them going. Life had never been easy, but they had always stayed strong together. Emily became a paralegal, working hard to build something better. She was smart, focused, and tough, but there was always a quiet sadness behind her eyes. She had learned not to expect help from anyone. Emily didn't trust rich people. To her, they lived in a world that ignored pain. They had power, and they used it without thinking about the people they hurt. She had seen it too many times. Her mother's latest trouble was proof. The building they lived in was being sold, and the rent had doubled overnight. They were going to be evicted. Behind it all, Emily believed, were shady business deals and corporate greed. And one of those deals, she was sure, led straight to Thornton Industries. Thornton Industries was owned by one of the richest families in the city. The Thorntons were known for their wealth, their power, and their strict image. At the center of it all was Marcus Thornton, their heir. He was tall, well-spoken, and always dressed like he was ready to give a speech. People expected him to take over the company soon. He was engaged to Chelsea Brandt, a socialite with perfect posture and a cold smile. Marcus seemed to have it all, but inside he felt lost. His family had shaped his entire life, his clothes, his future, even who he would marry. Chelsea wasn't someone he had fallen in love with. Their relationship was more of a deal than a romance. She came from a powerful family, and together, they made the perfect public image. That was what mattered most to the Thorntons. Chelsea liked things to look perfect. Her smile in photos, her expensive clothes, her perfect fiancé. When Emily walked into their world, even as a maid, she noticed right away. Emily didn't fit. She didn't try to. And that made Chelsea hate her. Then there was Aunt Vivian, Marcus's aunt and one of the most feared members of the family. She had sharp eyes, sharp words, and a deep pride in the family name. She didn't trust outsiders, especially not someone like Emily. To her, class was everything. Emily, in her eyes, didn't belong in the same room, let alone under the same roof. But Emily had a reason to be there. She had taken the maid job not just for the money, but to get close. Close enough to find proof, documents, emails, anything that showed Thornton Industries had been involved in shady property deals. Deals that had hurt people like her mother. She needed to know the truth, and she needed to stop it before her mother lost everything. Emily was walking a dangerous line. She was lying about who she was. If anyone found out, she would be thrown out in seconds. But time was running out. The eviction notice had already come. She had days, maybe a week. She had to find proof fast. At the same time, Marcus was facing his own quiet war. The life he was heading into felt like a trap. A fake relationship, a future built on power plays and false smile. When he looked at Emily, he saw something different, something real. But choosing her, even noticing her, would cause a scandal. Still, the feeling in his chest grew every time she walked past him with her eyes down and her spine straight. Both Emily and Marcus were trapped in roles they didn't choose. She was pretending to be someone she wasn't, and he was pretending he was happy. The stakes were higher than either of them said out loud. For Emily, it was about pride, justice, and saving her mother. For Marcus, it was about breaking free from a life that didn't feel like his own. Neither of them knew how much they were about to change each other's lives. The next night, the Thornton family gathered again for another dinner. The room was filled with soft music, clinking glasses, and forced smiles. Emily moved quietly, carrying trays and dishes as if she were invisible. But her eyes missed nothing. As she stepped out into the hallway to bring in another course, she paused. Voices drifted from the study nearby. The door was slightly open. She heard Chelsea's sharp tone first. "He's dragging his feet," Chelsea said. "We need this merger signed before the end of the quarter. If Marcus delays any longer, it could fall through." "Don't worry," Aunt Vivian replied. "He'll sign. He always does what he's told. He just needs the right pressure." Emily held her breath. "We remind him what's at stake," Vivian continued. "The company's future. His future with you." "I'm not losing this deal," Chelsea hissed. "Or him." Emily's heart pounded. She knew the merger they were talking about. It was with a company involved in illegal land grabs, the same kind that had led to her mother's building being sold off. It was a bad deal. Dirty. And Marcus was being tricked or pushed into approving it. She backed away from the door too quickly. In her rush, she didn't see the edge of the rug. Her foot caught, and the bowl of hot soup she was carrying tipped forward, straight onto Chelsea's lap as she stepped back into the dining room. Chelsea jumped up with a shriek. The creamy soup soaked her pale pink gown. Gasps echoed around the table. "Oh my God," Chelsea snapped. "Are you insane?" I'm sorry," Emily said quickly, reaching for a napkin. Aunt Vivian stood sharply, her voice cold as steel. "That was no accident." "It was," Emily said, her voice low, trying to stay calm. "Sabotage," Vivian hissed. "You've been nothing but trouble since the moment you walked in this house." Marcus stood too, his eyes flashing. "That's enough." Everyone turned to him. "It was an accident," he said, voice firm. "Let it go." Chelsea looked at him in shock. "You're taking her side?" "I'm saying calm down," Marcus said. "She didn't do it on purpose." The room froze for a long second. Then Aunt Vivian gave Emily a glare so cold it could cut glass. Emily quickly left the room, her hands shaking, face burning with heat. She made it to the kitchen and sat down on a wooden stool, her mind spinning. She hadn't meant to spill the soup. But now it didn't matter. She had heard too much. She had seen how deep the corruption went, and how blind Marcus was to it. Or maybe not so blind. He had defended her, in front of everyone. Why? Was he beginning to see the truth? Emily knew one thing. She couldn't leave this half done. The merger was dangerous, not just to her mother, but to many families like hers. And Marcus, whether he realized it or not, was at the center of it all. She had to find the document. Real proof. Thornton Industries had files, records, emails, signed contracts. She needed to get inside, dig through the system, and expose everything. Time was short. The eviction clock was ticking. But now, it wasn't just about saving her. Late one evening, after the rest of the house had gone quiet, Emily slipped out the back door dressed in plain black pants and a borrowed janitor's shirt. She had found a way into the Thornton office building, through a friend who helped her get a short-term cleaning shift. It wasn't legal, but it was her only chance. Inside the office, everything was polished and cold. The halls were wide and empty. She moved quickly, pushing a mop cart for cover, her eyes scanning every door. She needed access to the executive floor. She had read enough legal documents to know what to look for: proof of the merger, the bribes, the fake contract values. She was turning a corner when a voice stopped her. "You're not one of the regular cleaners," someone said. She turned and saw a young man leaning against the wall, holding a coffee mug. He looked like Marcus, same dark hair, same sharp eyes, but younger, more relaxed. "Derek Thornton." "I'm filling in," Emily said, keeping her head down. Derek raised an eyebrow. "You were at the house, right?" "At dinner." She froze for a second. "Just helping out." He took a sip from his mug. "Funny how you keep showing up." She gave a small smile but said nothing. Derek didn't press further. He stepped aside and let her pass. But now her heart was racing. If Derek recognized her, how long before someone else did too? The next morning at the estate, the tension had grown. Chelsea had noticed the way Marcus looked at Emily when he thought no one was watching. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was interest. Real interest. And that made Chelsea furious. "You're wasting your time playing housemaid," Chelsea said to Emily when they were alone in the hallway. "You think he sees you? He doesn't. This isn't your world. You don't belong here." Emily stayed silent. She had learned not to fight words with words. She kept her head high and walked past Chelsea without looking back. Aunt Vivian, too, had grown colder by the day. She would glance at Emily like she was a piece of dirt on her expensive carpet. One afternoon, she handed Emily a list of tasks and said, "Try not to ruin anything, dear. You people are good at breaking things." Emily's cheeks burned, but she said nothing. Every insult made her want to quit. But she couldn't. Not yet. A few nights later, back at the Thornton office, Emily finally found what she was looking for. A locked filing cabinet in the boardroom. She used a thin piece of metal to pop it open, something her old paralegal friend had taught her. Inside were folders with contracts, bank statements, and lists of payments to officials. The numbers were fake. The signatures didn't match. She had proof now, real proof. As she took pictures with her phone, the office light suddenly flicked on. Aunt Vivian's assistant, a tall man in a gray suit, stood in the doorway. "What do you think you're doing?" he asked sharply. Emily's mouth went dry. Before she could answer, footsteps sounded behind them, and Marcus appeared. "Leave her," Marcus said quickly. The assistant turned. She was going through private files. "I said leave." After a tense pause, the assistant backed off, but not without a warning look. Marcus stepped toward Emily. "What are you doing here?" Emily stared at him, unsure whether to lie or tell the truth. He looked into her eyes. "Please," he said softly. "Tell me." So she did. She told him everything. About her mother, the eviction, the merger, the bribes, the plan to trap him into signing, and the reason she took the maid job. Marcus didn't speak for a long time. Then he nodded. "I knew something wasn't right," he said, "but I didn't know how deep it went." The next day, at a fancy luncheon, Aunt Vivian pulled Marcus aside in front of several family friends. She smiled for the cameras, but her voice was ice. "You've embarrassed this family enough," she whispered. "Stand with us. Sign the merger. Marry Chelsea. Or walk away from everything." Marcus looked over at Emily, standing in the far corner, quiet and alone. He didn't answer. That evening, Emily got a call. It was her mother. The final eviction notice had come. They had 5 days to leave. Emily sat on the back steps of the estate, her hands in her lap, tears in her eyes. She had tried so hard, but maybe it wasn't enough. Marcus found her there. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never meant for this to happen." He sat beside her. "You did what you had to do." "I should go," she said. "This has gotten too big." "Don't," he said. "I have a plan, but I need your help." She looked at him, eyes full of fear and hope. The ballroom was packed with people in expensive suits and glittering dresses. It was a celebration of Thornton Industries' upcoming merger, supposedly a great business move. Journalists stood by with cameras, flashes going off every few seconds. Everyone was smiling, drinking, pretending everything was perfect. Marcus stood on the stage, next to Chelsea, who wore a flawless white gown and a practiced smile. Aunt Vivian sat proudly in the front row. The CEO of the other company stood nearby, waiting to shake hands and take photos. Marcus stepped up to the microphone. "Thank you all for coming," he began, voice calm but firm. "Before we proceed, I have something to say." A few people murmured. Aunt Vivian's eyes narrowed. "This merger has been promoted as a clean and profitable deal," Marcus continued. "But I've recently learned the truth. About the fraud, the bribes, and something else, something personal." He paused. Everyone leaned in. "Chelsea," he said, turning to her, "added a clause to our prenuptial agreement, one that would legally protect her and anyone else involved in the corruption." The room went completely silent. "She wanted me to sign off on this deal, stay quiet, and play the role of the perfect husband. But I won't do that." Gasps broke out across the room. Chelsea's smile dropped. "You can't prove any of that," she said through clenched teeth. "I don't need to," Marcus replied. At that moment, the ballroom doors opened. Emily walked in, but she wasn't wearing a maid's outfit. She wore a simple, elegant black dress. Her hair was down. She didn't walk like a servant. She walked like someone who had nothing to hide. She stepped up beside Marcus and held up her phone. "To anyone watching online," she said, looking into the nearest camera, "this is the truth. These are internal emails, fake invoices, and payments to city officials tied to this merger." She tapped a button, and a live stream began broadcasting the documents to the public. Chaos exploded in the room. Reporters rushed forward. Executives stepped back, whispering in panic. Aunt Vivian stood up, her face red with fury. "This is a disgrace. Shut it down." Chelsea grabbed her purse and stormed out, eyes full of rage. But then another voice spoke up. "I can confirm everything," Derek said, stepping forward from the crowd. "Emily's telling the truth. I gave her the documents. I couldn't keep lying." People turned shocked. "And there's more," Derek added. "This didn't start with her. It started years ago, with backdoor deals our family made. We all knew something was wrong. We just stayed quiet." Aunt Vivian turned to Marcus's father, sitting silently in the front row. "Say something." He stood slowly, looking older than he had in years. His voice cracked. "She's right," he said, nodding toward Emily. "We covered things up. For profits. For image. But it's over now." Aunt Vivian's knees gave out. Someone helped her sit down. Marcus turned to Emily. His voice was quiet, but full of strength. "Thank you for showing me what I couldn't see." Emily nodded. "It was never about revenge," she said. "It was about justice." Marcus turned back to the crowd. I'm stepping down from my role at Thornton Industries. I won't be part of a company built on lies. Anyone else who wants to rebuild the right way, meet me tomorrow. Everyone else, you're free to leave." The cameras caught every word. As the crowd broke into stunned conversation, Marcus and Emily stepped away from the stage together, shoulder to shoulder. The empire had started to fall, but something better was about to begin. The days that followed were full of change. Marcus's father kept his word. He went to the authorities and handed over files, emails, and contracts. He didn't try to escape the truth. For the first time, he admitted his role in the corruption and promised to help clean up the damage. It wasn't easy, but it was the right thing to do. Chelsea was dropped from all public appearances. Her family's name no longer held the same shine. The media turned against her, especially after the prenup news came out. She tried to deny everything, but the documents spoke for themselves. Aunt Vivian was no longer the powerful matriarch she once was. People whispered when she entered a room. Friends stopped calling. Her pride had always been her strongest weapon, but now it was her greatest weakness. She stayed silent, embarrassed and bitter, while the world she had built around control slowly fell apart. For Emily, the world shifted too, but in a better way. Her mother's eviction was stopped. The shady company behind it had been tied to the merger deal and was now under investigation. A city lawyer called to say her mother's home was safe for good. Emily didn't go back to being a paralegal. Instead, she got a call from a civic reform group. They had seen the live stream, heard her speak, and read the files she had exposed. They wanted her as part of their legal team to help fight against corruption across the city. It was the kind of job she had once only dreamed about. At first, she wasn't sure. So much had happened. She had lied about who she was. She had stepped into a world that wasn't her. But then she remembered why she did it. For her mother. For the truth. For all the people who never had a voice. She said yes. Marcus also walked away from his past. He left Thornton Industries and turned down the CEO position that had always been planned for him. Instead, he used his own money to start something new, a nonprofit for business transparency and legal reform. He asked Emily to help him build it. "I can't do this alone," he said. "But with you, we can actually make a difference." She took time to think about it. She wasn't sure if they could trust each other yet. But when she looked at him now, he wasn't the same man from the fancy dinners and silent stares. He had changed, and maybe so had she. So she agreed. Together, they started the project, slowly at first, working from a small office. But people began to notice. Donors reached out. Young lawyers and activists joined them. It wasn't just a job anymore, it was a mission. Emily found something she hadn't felt in a long time: pride. Not the kind that made her hide from others, but the kind that came from doing what was right. Marcus found peace. For the first time, he wasn't living someone else's plan. He was standing on his own. And between them, something quiet and strong began to grow. Not rushed, not perfect, but honest. The damage done by the Thorntons wouldn't be fixed overnight, but something better had. The room was small compared to the grand ballrooms Emily had once walked through, but it was full of warmth and hope. People sat in folding chairs, clapping as Marcus stepped up to the microphone. Behind him, a simple banner read, "Clearpath Initiative for Transparency and Truth." Emily stood beside him, holding a folder of notes she no longer needed. She looked out at the crowd, young professionals, activists, reporters, and in the front row, her mother. Her eyes were full of tears, but she smiled with so much pride, it made Emily's chest ache in the best way. Marcus finished his short speech, thanking everyone for believing in the project. Then he turned toward Emily and stepped aside. She took the mic, her hands steady. "A few months ago, I stood in a room full of people who didn't see me," she said. "I pretended to be someone else. I did it for my mother. I did it for the truth." She paused, eyes locking with Marcus's for a moment. "But today, I'm standing here not as a maid, not as a guest, but as a partner in something real. We're here to make sure no one has to lie or fight alone again." The room clapped again. Emily stepped back, and Marcus gently reached for her hand. He gave it a quiet squeeze. She didn't pull away. Her mother stood with the others, clapping proudly, her face shining with emotion. As the applause faded, Emily looked out one last time and thought of that night in the Thornton dining room. How small she had felt. How afraid. How hard she had worked just to be heard. She wasn't hiding anymore. Pretending was easy. Truth was everything. Hey besties. Thanks so much for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the drama, secrets, and sweet twist, don't forget to like, share, drop a comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories. Next up, her friends invited everyone except her to their girls' trip, so she booked the seat right beside them.